welcome into the Hot Read podcast for Wednesday, May the 1st. I'm your host, Eastn, director of published content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Eastn. I am joined on this lovely Tuesday afternoon as we were recording live by producer JT, who you can follow on social media at JT_Ruhnke. JT, how are we doing? Are we excited to recap the draft weekend?
I am. I'm excited because, once again, the draft season is over, but the grind does not stop. Time continues on. And that's what we're going to do today. Talk about these guys who we will become more familiar with throughout the next month or so. I know tomorrow is the first day of May, and with that comes OTAs and mini camps and things like that. So we will continue to get more and more familiar with these guys.
Absolutely. And we're going to go through just the Titans draft picks today. So all 7 of the players that were drafted, they of course added like 15 UDFAs to their roster as well, who we'll talk about more in future episodes. But for today, just focusing on the 7 guys who got the call this weekend in the order that they were drafted. And we're going to do so with a good old fashioned game of fake questions, real answers. If you're a friend of the show, fan of the show, or a friend of the show who's been listening for long enough, you know this is a recurring segment we do where we want to address viewer questions. We love viewer questions on this show. But there are times when we want to cut the middleman out because we're just too lazy to go on social media and ask, hey, we're doing an episode, a mailbag episode. Ask us your questions. We'll answer them on the show. We're going to ask the questions that you, our very highly intelligent audience, would have asked if we had done so. We decided to just write them ourselves, and we're going to ask them to ourselves, and we're going to answer them. Now, that's how fake questions, real answers go. Today, we're also going to do real questions, real answers. So if you're watching with us live on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube, we would love for you to have any questions you would like to pose for us about the Titans draft class, about their philosophy, about how this changes the outlook for 2024, any of those things that you have that you'd love for us to address. Drop them in the comments. You can do that by going to YouTube, finding Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page, and in the comment section of that live stream, that version of this live stream, that's where you can be a part of today's conversation and ask those questions. Producer JT is going to keep an eye on that all day long. And when we get to the question portion of each of these prospects, we will be answering some fake questions that we wrote ourselves, and then we'll be answering any real questions that you, our fine audience, has for us. So get those in now. If you got a question about the very last pick of the Titans draft class, go ahead and throw it in there now so that we can compile those and have them throughout today's episode. Hey, if you're watching with us live, by the way, make sure you're doing us a solid, hitting subscribe on YouTube, hitting like on YouTube. Those things are huge for us with the algorithm, helping suggest the video, it's Fugazi, all these internet things that nobody really understands, but it's helpful. And then while you're on Twitter, if you're watching us there, hitting retweet, hitting like, whatever you can do to help us get as many live eyeballs on today's draft recap as possible, because it's a very big episode for us here. And with that, JT, let's start with an overall draft reaction. Let's look at this entire operation by the Tennessee Titans, the 7 players that they added, and perceive it from a 10,000-foot view. First of all, we have to brag a little bit that our draft guide, the do and don't draft guide for 2024 for the Tennessee Titans that we put out a week before the draft, another banger edition. The first 4 picks the Titans made, all do draft candidates that we wrote about. Of the 35 do draft guys we put in there, we got 4 of them right, the first 4. And so we felt like we couldn't miss. Now, there's a little bit of a heat check in the later rounds. The Titans went off the board a little bit and drafted some guys that we don't necessarily hate by any means, but we weren't predicting those. But we got the most important 4 right. And for that reason, I can say pretty confidently we're pleased with the top of their draft. We were very pleased. If you watched our live streams over the weekend, which, by the way, there is a compilation video. If you missed those and you wanted to see how we reacted in the moment on this feed, the podcast version, or on YouTube, just go 1 episode prior to this. You'll find a compilation of all of our live reactions to all 7 picks from the weekend. But if you watched that along with us, we were pretty jazzed about all the decisions they made. And that's not, the draft is the peak cope event of the NFL calendar. There's a lot of about facing that's done about, certain prospects your team goes and gets. People convince themselves that they no longer hate a guy within like 30 minutes of them being drafted to their team, because that's what you do. It's a season of hope. But we have it on the record as liking these guys long before they were ever Tennessee Titans. And so we had to brag about that a little bit, JT, because we kind of nailed it.
We did, and I thought we could continue it as as we saw in, I
Had
believe,
7,
round
7
6.
pointers all the way down.
Yeah, we could have.
We'd never shut up about it.
Yeah, we wouldn't have, but
It's
right.
probably good for us that we didn't hit on all of them.
Grant Carthen and company needed to heat check us here, for like
Right.
you said. But yeah, I
Stay
mean,
humble. Stay humble.
let me
Right.
go through the first 4 rounds of the draft. Those are all guys who we, from the get-go, from Senior Bowl day 1, were guys that
Mhm.
we really liked, and it just so happened to work out that a lot of the guys that Rand Carthon and this Titans team drafted were from the Senior Bowl. So these are guys that we've
Yeah.
been around a long time.
I'm glad you
And
mentioned
it
that,
just
by the way, because and I know we talked about this weekend. It's kind of funny how John Robinson on his way out got this label of being a Senior Bowl merchant. It's like this guy, he goes to Mobile in January. He does what you can't do in the pre-draft process. He falls in love with these kids that are there, which is not the entire pool of guys. And he reaches for him in the draft, and he's making up his mind as January when he should be making up his mind in April. Rand Carthen, he figured out the workaround there. You can actually be a Senior Bowl merchant because that's what he did in this draft class. He drafted J.C. Latham and then 6 Senior Bowlers. If you just don't actually physically go to Mobile and then make it a whole news cycle with the local radio stations, oh God, Rand Carthen's not the Senior Bowl. What's he doing? He's not taking his job seriously. He's setting himself back against the other GMs in the league. All of that it's just the long con, so that they don't then point out when you draft all the Senior Bowlers that you're a Senior Bowl merchant. It's smart. That's chess, I think.
And then, of course, next year there's going to be no Senior Bowl guys, and we're going to go there for a week, and then we're going to be like, well, now it's like I think we have to hedge ourselves next year. How hard on Senior Bowl week do we go? Because now Rand Carthen's going to play mind games, and there's going to be no
Yeah,
Senior
like
Bowlers next
we
year.
thought he was a hand guy because he kept drafting. Mike Herndon noticed like, oh, he's drafting like 95th and up percentile hand size by position guys. Like, is there like putting our tinfoil hats on? And then maybe he's a guy who likes guys with J names because he drafted 6 guys with a J name in the or no,
5.
5 guys in this class with a
5
J
out of
name.
7.
5 out of 7. I don't know. We're still trying to nail down what exactly the trend is with Rand Carthon. But on a more serious note, my ultimate thought before we dive into the actual specifics on each guy is that this was a meat and potatoes draft. This was a draft that you have to have when you're coming off of, like the Titans are, not last year, but the 2 years previous, 2 consecutive draft classes where you're not adding anybody worth re-signing, right? There's a big reason why the Titans were in the position they were this free agency cycle with so much money to spend on outside guys. It's because you don't have guys in the building worth signing to second, third contracts. Like they had a lot of free agents leaving, which is why they had to go and get a lot of free agents to bring in a new. And that's because the guys leaving weren't worth paying. They weren't the guys that you want to extend. They weren't guys coming off of their rookie deal that are worthy of getting a big second contract. And not every second contract guy is a market resetter, right? But what you need as an organization is to hit marginally well on each draft class so that you have guys that are worthy of a second contract that, while it's not necessarily resetting the market, he's a culture guy. He's somebody that you can keep around. He's going to be a role player. He's going to be the foundation upon which your team builds out a roster, right? It's the guys that keep you from being a stars and scrubs style roster, which sometimes works. We saw the Rams do this a couple years ago where they had Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford and like 7 guys that were household names and then a bunch of dudes you've never heard of. And guess what? They won a Super Bowl. It works sometimes, but that makes you super top heavy as a roster. It makes your financial situation tenuous and expensive and not super sustainable long term. And if you sustain any injuries of any kind to your stars, you're left with the scrubs. So it's a dangerous way to be living. And in order to avoid that, you got to do like what the Kansas City Chiefs are doing. And I wish I'd written this down. I believe next season, the Chiefs are projected to be starting, I think it was 6 or 7 guys on the defensive side of the ball that they have drafted in the last 2 years. Starters. And that's not guys they're starting because they have no other options. No, these are guys that are bona fide NFL starters. That's how you keep a dynasty going. You continue to hit on C+ to B+ level guys, not huge stars in the later round, but bona fide meat and potato guys. And that's, to me, that's what the Titans did in this draft class.
It's a little bit also of taking your medicine. I think that's something that you alluded to either on day 2 or day 3 of our draft coverage. Like you said, you got to start fresh somewhere, especially with how John Robinson missed for an entire 2.5 years on draft classes.
Right.
You just need to kind of patch up the holes of the sinking ship, and I think that's what this draft class in the direction they're going kind of aim to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we titled today's episode, I think we titled today's episode, Grading the Titans Draft Class. Before we dive into each individual guy, I'll share what I tweeted out a couple of days ago, my general thought on the Titans class grade wise. I think overall is a B plus A minus draft for me. JC Latham, their first round pick, a solid A. Devondre Sweat, a B plus. Cedric Gray, an A. Jarvis Brownlee Jr., A plus. Jaquan Jackson, the one pick that I really disagree with, C minus. James Williams, a B, and Jalen Harrell, a B plus. So I didn't see any of these guys besides Jaquan Jackson, who we'll talk about. That it's not to say that there's no chance he is an impact player and age as well as a draft pick, but as a 6th round pick there were some circumstances we'll dive into in a bit that we weren't crazy about and left us a little bit scratching our noggins. But besides that, I think that they made some really wise moves. And from a, addressing needs standpoint, that's the last thing I'll say, JT. They came into this draft class with a couple of really well-defined needs, right? Like in free agency, they addressed the cornerback position. They locked that down. They addressed the wide receiver position. They set themselves up, at least for this year and next, to be in good shape. Now, they need some youth there, but that's not as pressing a need as it previously was. The interior, the offensive line, they shore up with a big center addition. So they come into this draft with, okay, they need a starting tackle so bad. They need starting linebacker so bad. And they need to address at least one of defensive line or the edge position on the defensive front because they are lacking bodies there as well. And so they come in and they draft in order a tackle, a defensive lineman, a linebacker, a cornerback to shore up depth, a wide receiver, which is the pick we weren't crazy about, but we'll talk about, and then a linebacker and an edge player to round it out. Some high upside guys, dart throws in the 7th round. So they addressed exactly the positions of need that they had coming in, and I think they managed to do so without reaching. Another thing we'll talk about throughout today's episode. I don't think any of these guys scream to me reaching because you desperately need this position, and maybe this wasn't the best player on your board, but you need that position really badly.
Yeah, I think so. I think the one that can be argued is the Devondre Sweat, just because it is the most volatile one. But
right.
As we've learned later,
for sure.
later in the week, you've seen some circumstances that maybe make that not the biggest reach in the world. But without further ado, I think we can get into just talking prospect by prospect, and we have a lot of information on their background and just things to know about these prospects before we truly get boots on the ground and are able to meet them later this upcoming month. So let's start with JC Latham.
Yeah, so JC Latham was the Titans' first round pick, 7th overall, did stick and pick, did not trade out of that position like we thought they were inclined to do. Offensive tackle out of Alabama. Here's the basic introduction, and we're going to run down each one of these guys from an informational standpoint so that you have the 411 on what exactly the Titans have signed up for. Then we'll get to some fake questions, real answers. JC Latham, he played left tackle at IMG Academy in high school. Teammates with JJ McCarthy, linebacker Nolan Smith, who's an Eagle, and cornerback DJ Turner. Got a basketball and track background, big shot put guy in high school, 5-star recruit coming out, number 1 offensive tackle in the 2021 recruiting class, and the number 3 recruit nationally. He is only 21 years old, and we're going to turn to the draft Bible, the beast, Dane Brugler's masterpiece over at The Athletic, for some basic information on each of these guys. The scouting report that I think is the most universally accepted. And so JC Latham, in his final season at Alabama, played 14 of 14 games at right tackle, played right tackle at Alabama, which we'll talk about more in just a moment, was 2nd team All-American, 1st team All-SEC. Measurements, exactly what you want in your tackle, right? 6'5" and change, 342 pounds, a big boy on the outside, huge wingspan, 84 3/8 inch wing, 35 1/8 inch arms. So no concerns when it comes to height or length. The strengths that are listed by Dan Brugler, arguably the strongest player in the draft class. We've been saying that all season long. He squares up with broad shoulders, long arms, large hands, moves well for his size, and his 340 plus pounds are well distributed. He wears it well. You can see that on tape. You can see it in the press conference when he's just walking around. He carries 340 kind of sneakily, if that's even possible. He's able to kick out and establish a strong base to cover up wide speed, violently uses his hands with no gloves to meet and control rushers. He talked about that in his press conference, how he only wears gloves when he's got blood on his hands, which is metal. Like, that's badass. And doesn't want to come out of the game when the refs see the blood on his hands. He generates a surge in the run game with upper body strength and lower body explosion. His grip strength is remarkable, and he won't shy away from the chance to toss, dump, and ragdoll his man. Embraces the bully role and is very proud of his self-given TK nickname, which stands for Trench King. Durable and did not miss a single game in his 3 years at Alabama, including 27 straight starts to finish his career. He played nearly 1750 snaps over that stretch on the offensive line and rarely even left the field, let alone missed a game. A couple of weaknesses that are listed here. Undisciplined and youthful tendencies. Not shocking. Played just 3 years in college, only 21 years old coming into the NFL. He's guilty of oversetting as a pass blocker, allowing rushers to cross his face and win inside. That's where we're going to get to some of the concerns with that weight, right? At that size, he moves well for that size, but naturally the give and the take with that is, well, at that size, if you get your hands on a guy, they're not running through you. They're not going anywhere. But they may be able to counter and cross you inside or get around the edge if you overset and burn you a little bit with true speed off the edge. So that's a concern. That's the give and take there. He doesn't always bring his hips in the run game, causing him to lunge off balance at times, combined for 18 penalties over his 2 seasons as a starter, including 7 false starts and 6 holding calls. In conclusion, Brugler writes that overall, Latham needs to clean up his inconsistent yet fixable habits, but he offers elite play strength and functional football movements to stay square and overmatch his opponent. He's an ascending prospect with the talent to win a starting right tackle job as an NFL rookie, although some teams project him best inside at guard, and he has him graded as a first round number 13 overall in the class. So with that, JT, let's dive into some fake questions and real answers. I think that ends with an interesting notion. Starting as a right tackle, some teams projecting him best inside at guard. We'll address that and some other things. But what's the first fake question we had sent in today?
Well, the last thing you said right there, first round grade, Brugler had him ranked at number 13 overall. Of course, the Titans select him at number 7. So was Latham at a reach at pick 7? And should the Titans have traded down instead?
So anybody that listened to this show pre-draft knows that we were strong proponents of trading down, adding capital on day 1 or on day 2. And I think, we knew that the tackles in the first round were going to fly off the board in probably the top 20. I think all 6 ended up going top 20, if I'm not mistaken, JT. Yeah, so the top 20 this year, weird, because I know this because it was 6 quarterbacks, 6 tackles, and then 8 other guys. So 12 of the top 20 picks were tackles and quarterbacks, which the quarterbacks thing, bonkers, crazy, irresponsible, but that's neither here nor there. Maybe we underrated just how highly you had to draft your guy if you wanted your guy. We knew before we went into this draft, I was pretty confident that he was tackle 2 on their board. I said that on the last episode of this show before we got to the draft, that I think J.C. Latham is their second favorite tackle to Joe Alt in this class. And maybe that was too low because we heard over the weekend that Latham was Bill Callahan, the Titans' new offensive line coach, son of Brian, offensive line guru. He was his
father
favorite.
Of Brian.
What did I say? Son? Yeah, flip that. Father of Brian. He was his favorite player in the entire draft class. This was Bill's guy. And we had hints of this throughout the draft season, right? Back in, I think, early March when the Alabama Pro Day happened, we had a lot of footage and a lot of reporting of, hey, Bill Callahan's down there. He's spending a lot of one-on-one time with J.C. Latham. He's got his hands on him. They're talking, it later came out that when Latham was talking with the Titans brass, it was supposed to be a 30-minute conversation they had planned on the books that ended up turning into a 2-hour conversation. Like, this is a guy that they were interested in for a long time. And I think you just have to defer to an expertise like Bill Callahan has and say, listen, if this guy thinks this is the dude in this class, and we said coming in, hey, the top 3, maybe 4 tackles in this class would all be tackle 1 in any other draft class. That's how talented they are. He sees this guy as a bona fide blue chip player. go and get him at 7. And that's what the Titans did after Joe Alt already went off the board at 5 to the Chargers. And you had teams the Titans knew were hungry for a tackle behind them. If they had moved back to like 13 or 14, the Jets took tackle at 11. And who else took tackle? Another team
Saints
took
tackle as well.
Tackle. Right. So both of those teams, I think, absolutely liable to take Latham if the Titans had moved back. And since Latham clearly was their guy, I don't think you can say it was a reach at 7, because if you see Latham as a significantly better tackle, or if you saw Latham and Alt as significantly better tackles than the next group, which they may very well have, you got to get your guy, even if it means foregoing some extra capital.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. This clearly was the guy that they probably wanted the most, because we even heard from Rand Carthen, there was the feeling that Joe Alt was going to be gone, so there seemed to be less attention on him from the get-go, something that we kind of heard even going back to the Combine. This feels like a foregone conclusion at this point in hindsight.
Well, what have we said 2 years in a row, JT? I've run a poll twice in January. Yes. There's always a guy that's the first my guy in consensus with all of Titans Twitter, all of the Titans Nation. Like, it's the guy they attach themselves to as soon as the season ends and draft season begins. And last year was Paris Johnson Jr., and this year was Joe Alt. Got to get that guy at 11 last year. Got to get that guy at 7 this year. And I ran a poll to confirm that, and it was overwhelming. That's the guy. Got to get that guy back in January. And then I tweet out and I say, unfortunately, you should mark him off of your list of potential guys, because it's way too good to be true. People are way too in agreement on this, way too early. It's not going to happen. He's not going to be there. And twice in a row it's happened. So just know, going into next year, whoever everybody loves in January, just do yourself a favor, scratch him out, take your hopes and throw them in the trash. It's not happening.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw out Luther Burden already from Missouri, as they need a wide receiver or something like that. That's gonna be the guy next year.
April 30th. JT's planting the flag on Luther Burden. Write that down.
Look, Jacob even just said in the comments right there, next year Luther Burden. Everybody's on the train already.
It's not happening, so go ahead and write it off your list. I'm sorry that Luther Burden cannot be a Tennessee Titan.
I'm going to defer, whether it's a reach or not. I'm going to defer to Bill Callahan on this one, like everyone else in this city has said, because guess what? Bill Callahan probably knows more about the offensive line than literally every media member in this market combined. Yes. There's just no arguing at this point. No. There's no arguing about it. I think that if he is the guy that Bill Callahan wanted, they were going to go out and get him no matter what. And I think that's what they did. Now, there have been questions why he was offensive tackle 2 for you. He was offensive tackle 3 for me, but that was mostly because I just really, really like Olu Fashanu. That was like kind of one of my guys. So not a knock on Latham in particular, but I think there were some questions because of the whole right tackle thing. Even Kenneth John chiming in here saying, I think A is too high for Latham till he proves his left tackle chops at this high level. Hasn't played it since high school, would go B+, which brings us to our next fake question. Can Latham play left tackle like the Titans want him to? And if he can't, is it a failure if he ends up playing right tackle?
This is top of my list of pet peeves this draft cycle. And I've been preaching this for a long time. Kenneth, guys like Kenneth know this, that I'm about to say this, but he's welcomed his opinion. If you are of the opinion that in 2024, the left tackle position is significantly more important than the right tackle position, you are mistaken. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. That's just the reality of the modern NFL. In terms of value, in terms of compensation, the top right and left tackles in the modern NFL are paid essentially the exact same. And in terms of the people they are going up against on the defensive side of the ball, you could argue that right tackles actually have it worse. All, and I mean all, of the top edge rushers in the NFL right now, the top 5 guys, you could think of, okay, it's the Bosa brothers, it's Max Crosby, it's Myles Garrett, it's TJ Watt. Where do those guys play? You look it up. Oh, they all line up against the right tackle. Why is that? Because there's an ebb and a flow. There's a pendulum swinging back and forth in all things. But in the NFL, as offenses do one thing, defenses slowly learn to counter that thing. And then offenses have to counter, and it's back and forth, right? There's this ebb and flow of philosophy and strategic approach to the game. And as for a long time, the top tackle on most teams was put on the left side, because a lot of the best rushers in the league went on the left side. And also, more fundamentally, as most quarterbacks are right-handed, that's the blind side, and you can get after the quarterback without them seeing you coming. That's where the better tackles were placed in the NFL. And then over time, some of these new era guys come into the league and they say, hey, I don't necessarily care if the quarterback sees me coming. Let me just go up against the worst player on the end. And let me find we're playing this team this week. Let's scout who's the worst tackle. And invariably, it was the right tackle because teams were putting the best guy on the left side. And so the Nick Bosa's of the world, the Myles Garrett's of the world is saying, I don't care if he sees me coming. In fact, I'm happy to strike fear into his eyes. Let me face the worst tackle, burn him all game, and we will net more as a defense by me doing that. And that's the way that it works right now. A lot of teams, like you think about the best lines in the league. The Eagles, okay, the Lions, okay, those, let's just say those two. Where's the best player play on the offensive line? They're both right tackles. Think about the Chargers, right? Okay, Rashawn Slater, great young tackle. Where's he play? Oh, he plays on the right side as well. And he played left in college. They moved him to right. They didn't have to do that, but they did. There's nothing wrong with having your best tackle play right tackle. And in fact, the more important thing that, the forest that you are missing for this tree that, you have to have left tackle because your brain is stuck in the past. I'm sorry to say, but it is. You're missing the point that the Titans don't have either. This would be a more informed discussion if it's like the Titans had, they had they had an average right tackle and they really have a big hole at left tackle. No, my friend, they don't have anything. They don't have a right tackle or a left tackle that you want playing on Sundays. At least nobody that's proven right now. Maybe Bill Callahan works his magic and whips up NPF into a starting caliber NFL tackle. But
Sadiq
right now, that
Charles
he is
masterclass.
not. Right, and we'll sing his praises when that happens. But I wouldn't exactly bank on that happening. And so what's more important than having a great left tackle in the NFL is having at least one good tackle. That's what you have to have. And that's the point the Titans are making with this pick. And that's the thinking they have with this decision, where, again, they've made it clear they're going to try him at left tackle. And he played that in high school. And he has the muscle memory from just 2 years ago of playing left tackle for 4 consecutive years in college or in high school. Their thinking is, hey, like, if we just have one good tackle, we can scheme around that. We talked about it all last year, JT. This idea that, hey, if the Titans just had one tackle on either side of the ball, you can send chip help with the tight end. You can line up in jumbo and shift that way. You can double to the weak side. You can send the running back in max protect and have him chip on the weak side. Like, you can work around that. But when you don't have any tackles, you are screwed. It's over. You can't do it. And so whether Latham ends up a year, 2 years from now being the Titans' longtime left tackle or longtime right tackle, what matters is that he's a good tackle. And while I'll submit that it's still Will Levis's blind side, maybe left tackle is 10% more important than right tackle. It is not a significant enough gap for you to consider him being a right tackle a failure. And I think folks that are leaning so heavily into, the Titans have guys on the roster that can play right tackle. They got MPF. They've got Dylan Radins who might can play there. Like they've got dudes. I think you're giving those guys too much credit for being, first of all, being right side only guys. Like, if you're saying maybe MPF can play functional right tackle, well, I could counter, well, maybe he can play functional left tackle too. We don't know the answer to either of those questions. Those things are both as unknown as humanly possible. Hey, Dylan Radins, you know where he played in college? Left tackle. So actually, I could argue maybe if he's a functional tackle anywhere, maybe it's on the left side. My point being, you're leaning too heavily into the known guys that it's a lot of copium with these guys potentially being starting tackles for the Titans on the right side in your argument that Latham being a left tackle is the most important thing ever. One last thing before and then I'll quit ranting on this. Two last things. A lot of people pre-draft ragging on Latham, like, hey, you seen the weight on that guy. I'm not sure he's a great athlete, and I'm not sure he thinks he's a great athlete because he said out of all his athletic testing drills pre-draft, he didn't do those at the combine, he didn't do them at his pro day. What's up? And a lot of people accused him, well, he's a bad athlete and he knows it because he didn't do them. Latham, at his introductory press conference with the Titans, said, I did not test the combine because I was dealing with a high ankle sprain that we found early in the draft process, back I think it was January or something. shortly after their season ended and he started training for his pre-draft process. So all of those people that accused Latham of skipping the testing because he knew he was a poor mover were wrong. And that, of course, like could have been prevented for those people that were wrong if they had just turned on the tape like we said to do. Because if you watched any of JC Latham pre-draft, you knew, and I like actually watched him, play football, you knew he was a good mover. The athletic testing is a nice a confirmation of that. It's important to parse the the specifics of like this guy over this guy. If it just raise your thin margin, yes, that sure, whatever. But you can't say he's a poor mover if you watched him. You just can't. You are telling me without telling me that you didn't watch the kid play, because he is a very good mover, especially for being 340 pounds. The last thing, and this is something that Mike Herndon pointed out. I saw him pointed out first. When Bill Callahan arrived in Cleveland, his previous stop as the offensive line coach for the Browns, they were ranked 17th in the NFL in pass blocking and 29th in run blocking per PFF. He inherited one really good player in left guard Joel Bitonio and a decent center in J.C. Treader. Right guard and both tackle positions were major holes for the Browns when he came in. They signed Jack Conklin from the Titans and drafted Alabama's right tackle, ring a bell, in the top 10, ring a bell, and flipped him, ring a bell, to left tackle. They ranked first in both categories in Callahan's first year and have been a top 3 offensive line unit in football for most of the last 4 years. Jedrick Wills, the player in question, who was Alabama's right tackle, drafted in the top 10, who moved from right to left in the NFL in his first year. He played pretty well from the jump, and Callahan coaxed a massive leap out of right guard Wyatt Teller, who had been acquired for a couple of day 3 picks the year before. Now, am I saying that's going to happen for the Titans? No, I'm not. Am I saying it's possible? Yeah, because we just saw this exact same guy do it. The blueprint here is shockingly similar. And so I just think this idea that he has to be a left tackle for it to work, or questioning whether he can be a left tackle or not, I think it's silly on both fronts. Okay, soapbox, I'm going to set it aside, stepping down.
That's really just is a great argument to say that really no matter how this shakes out, there's a very, very high chance that JC Latham at the next level works out in some capacity, whether it is at left tackle or it is at right tackle. It makes the devil advocate, argument, if you want to play that with these prospects, very, very hard to do, just with a lot of things that are already in place for him. I think the really only avenue that you can go with this is that what is that avenue that could lead to this not being a home run pick? Is it that the teams who saw him as more of an inside player as a guard were right, and that's what we see this entire time? Or is there really not an avenue to JC Latham not being a plus starter at the next level?
So it's a difficult answer. What's the devil's advocate argument for if this doesn't work out, here's why. But it should be, right? For really any first rounder and certainly any top 10 pick, if you can easily, if somebody asks you like, how does this not work out as a top 10 pick? And the answer is easy. You messed up. You probably shouldn't have drafted. Like, Falcons fans are in part
Michael
mad
Penix,
because you can say like, well, how does this pan out poorly in the future? You want that list alphabetically or in order of importance? Because they're like, it's easy to come by. With JC Latham, there's a reason why he was one of my blue chip, purple chip prospects in this class, a top 10 bona fide player. There's not a whole lot. Like, here's the argument. Okay, you can always go to injury. He's too injured, and you could point to at that size, he may, be in and out of the lineup. Maybe, but as we pointed out previously, he's not ever missed a game in high school or in college, ever. So I don't know when he's going to start. Maybe that's at the NFL level, but like, there's no reason to believe that's the case. Okay, maybe like you say, he's more an interior player than an outside player. That would be it. But even then, would it be? There are levels to failure, right? Because if in 3 years the Titans are still seeking tackles, but they have an incredible interior line buoyed by 2 incredibly young players at the guard positions, it's not the worst place to be. Now, yes, ultimately it will be a failure because you still need tackles, and that's the most important position on the line. But I think when the worst case is he's an incredible interior player and you have 2 incredible interior players, maybe 3, like that's not that's a lot better than he flames out and never plays. I just don't see that happening. So it's a difficult one to make. We have already pointed out that I think if he's a right tackle, that's not really a devil's advocate argument because I don't think it's a failure. So yeah, either he's injured often out of nowhere, or he's primarily an inside player, in which case there are worse outcomes.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It's a hard case to make. The one that isn't is, with there where there's a lot of different possibilities with this
Yeah,
next player
sure.
is this Titans second round pick in Tavondre Sweat out of Texas.
Yeah, so let's dive into the introduction of Tavondre Sweat, defensive lineman out of Texas, picked at 38 overall in the second round. The Titans, once again, did not trade back like we were hoping they might. Sweat has a basketball background in high school. I'll let you guess what position he played. 3-star recruit, college roommates with running back Jonathan Brooks, who also went in this draft. Where did he end up going?
He went to the Carolina Panthers.
That sounds right.
48th.
Yeah, somewhere right there. He wears a massive chain around his neck that says "Make 'em Sweat," which is gangster. And then he ranked third best amongst the best fits for defensive linemen in our buddy Zach Lyons over at Stacking the Inbox. He has a Titans fit rating, which is an analytical approach to the both on-field production and play style, combined with the off-field testing, athleticism, height, weight, measurables, all those things, combining that into a profile that fits what the Titans brass, Brian Callahan, Rand Carthon, historically have most liked to find a fit rating. And he was the third best fit among the defensive linemen in this class based on that fit rating. In 2022, he was an honorable mention all Big 12 player. And in his final season, he really broke out, won the Outland Trophy in his final season with Texas, 45 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 4 passes defended, was a unanimous All-American, winner of the Outland Trophy, which is an award given by the Football Writers of America to the best interior lineman in college, offensive or defensive. So he was the best interior player on any line. Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, first team All Big 12, had a 2-yard touchdown catch, which is electric. I'm sure he'll be lobbying for that. Imagine the jumbo package, 2 deep. You got Jeffrey Simmons on one hip of Will Levis, Tavondre Sweat on the other hip, 2-yard line. How do you cover that? I don't know. Good luck. And then a blocked point after attempt, a blocked PAT last season. Measurements, once again, off the chart, a beefy fellow. The Titans added over 700 pounds of offensive and defensive line help with their first 2 picks. 6'4.5", 366 pounds when he weighed in at the combine. Plays, at least in college, heavier than that. Ran a 5.27 40-yard dash despite that, which is hilarious. As we pointed out at the combine, he ran a faster 40 than both JT and I did at, like 150 pounds less. So that's, embarrassing for us, but crazy impressive for him. Some strengths listed by Dan Brugler in the Beast. Massive body type with proportionate thickness, long arms, and big hands. Displays grown man strength to bully blockers, which there are some folks that'll tell you he doesn't play with strength. Don't listen to those folks. Flashes pop and power in his hands to swipe down blockers or puts them on their backside. One NFL scout told Brugler in the process, "Did you see the new Mario movie? When Donkey Kong pounds the snot out of Mario?" That gave me flashbacks to Sweat's film. He has surprising quickness for his size with range to make plays downfield. He can hold his ground versus double teams. More on that in a minute. Has a knack for finding passing lanes. 17 batted throws in his career, 6 in 2023. Has always been known for his smile and fun-loving attitude, but adopted more of a locked-in mentality in 2023 without losing his playful personality. Now the weaknesses, and there are plenty here. More concerns maybe than weaknesses, but there's plenty to talk about. He must keep his weight under control is number 1 on the list here. NFL scouts say he played the 2023 season at 380-ish. High cut, tends to play tall out of his stance, so going to have to keep his pad level low at the next level. Going to have to learn that, train that. Pass rush skills are a work in progress. Need to develop more move-to-move transitions in his pass rush arsenal. Showed improved conditioning in his final season, but was kept fresh, 35.9 snaps per game. More on that in a minute. Improved maturity during the 23 season, but was labeled a party animal and class clown. And this is the portion that you've heard for weeks now on Tavondre Sweat online. As an underclassman, he was labeled a party animal and a class clown by many NFL scouts, who also questioned his commitment to becoming the best player he could. Converted some doubters after adopting more of a professional mentality in 2023, but was arrested and charged with DWI just weeks before the draft this month. In summary, overall, Sweat must continue turning the brilliant flashes into more consistency, but he is a rare athlete for his size, With the power and ingredients to be a dominant force against the run, though he has the traits to become an impact NFL starter, he needs to stay conditioned and locked in to reach his potential. And Dan Brugler ultimately had a 4th-round grade on him.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, right? 4th-round grade, which is kind of interesting when you consider the recent history of it. But let's just take that for what it is at face value, with Dane Brugler in the beast giving him a 4th-round grade. The Titans take him in the 2nd round at 38th overall. How could you categorize this as anything but a massive reach for the Titans based on the consensus big boards and Dane Brugler's board?
Right. So there's multiple elements to this, but none more important than that DWI that he was arrested for 3 weeks ago. If you go back in the Wayback Machine and just check, like, where was this guy before then? On Dan Brugler's big board, ended up at 129 overall. That was after the DWI, 4th-round grade. Before that, he was 33rd. So obviously that's like, unless something magical happened where tape was uncovered where he sucked all of a sudden and Dan Brugler had to massively change his charting on the guy. That's a almost 100 position slide in Dan Brugler's ratings because of the DUI charge. On the consensus draft board, look at more than just Dane, right? Because there are more folks out here doing this than just Dane, even though he's the best in the business. Right around the 40th player is where Devondre Sweat was ranked all throughout January, February through March. 40th overall is where he hovered on their chart. And then after the DWI, by draft day, he had fallen to around the 70th player. So again, that DWI being the prime, really being the only thing that impacted him in that way. Now you go into how NFL teams perceive this. And for better or for worse, I think it was our buddy Zach Lyons who said this on our live stream on Saturday. NFL teams just don't care as much about that kind of thing than we do, than media does, than players, than fans do. Again, for better or for worse, that's not as big a concern for them if they talk to the guy and they learn from the guy and they figure out the situation. And Rand Carthen went on 104.5 earlier this week talking about how he was getting texts from executives around the league that they were going to take Devondre Sweat right after them in the 2nd round. The Titans take him there at 38, and it caused a bit of a run on defensive tackles. You saw the next 3 or 4 top guys available at the defensive tackle position go in the next 12-ish picks. I should have written this down, but
yeah,
they all went.
It started with
short succession, right?
With Ruhnke, Ohorhoro, and then
right.
Johnny Newton, and then Sweat, and then I believe
Fisk.
After that, Fisk and Dorless and all those guys, and Chris Jenkins to the Bengals, who they eventually took
Mason
in the 2nd
Smith.
round there.
Hello, Jaguars.
Mason Smith. Yep, exactly. Trent Baalke masterclass right there. It was a big round for defensive tackles in the 2nd.
And so when a GM comes out the day after the draft and says something like that, obviously it's liable to just be a bald-faced lie. You have to take it with a grain of salt. But it seems pretty clear to me when they made this move and in the aftermath that the Titans at least believed that something like this was the case on Friday night when they made the pick. I'm sorry if you think that they are dumb enough to take Sweat that far above the media consensus when they needed extra capital badly in the first place, and they knew it. If you think they're dumb enough to do that, unless they had a good reason to believe it may have been their only chance to land him, like, I don't know what to tell you. You just have a different opinion of these guys and their process than I do, because I don't think that's something that they would have willingly done. And it was pointed out by many that, like, it's probably the Bengals or the Jaguars that were worried about coming up and getting their guy. And my money's on the Bengals. They need to replace DJ Reader. They took 2 defensive tackles back to back in the 2nd and the 3rd. Before the Titans made that pick, leading up to day 2, a lot of the talk was, hey, a great candidate for the Titans to trade down with if they wanted to move out of 38 would be the Bengals, because they had kind of the perfect, just so happened they had the perfect compensation package that would be a nice 1-for-1, 2-for-1 trade for the Titans. And so I think that's what was in the works and was probably one of the offers the Titans received for that pick. But then again, Jacksonville, they go with a defensive tackle there as well, and they were moving and grooving throughout the weekend. So I think it was one of those teams they were concerned about, and I'm willing to buy the fact that they were confident they weren't going to be able to get their guy Sweat unless they stuck at 38 and grabbed him.
Yeah, and that would make sense when it was the Bengals, because it was It really felt like this entire time it was the Bengals and the Titans, the two teams that really poked around Sweat's camp the most. And
Mm-hmm.
you also saw basically on the week of the draft, when 30 visits were just wrapping up at the 11th hour, the Bengals invited Johnny Newton in, so they were very interested in him as well.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing with him, though, is that even in his press conference, he said if he can get down to 355 from where he is right now, probably
Hall
around
of Famer, baby.
366, he
Hall
says
of
he's going to
Famer.
be a Hall of Fame player. However, that's probably a lot easier said than done. And,
Yeah.
Playing at 38 or 380 pounds, the big thing this week has been that he only averages 35 snaps a game in college.
2-down player. Can't
Can
stay on
you
the field. Can't do it.
What makes you so confident that he can be a 3-down player?
Okay, so first of all, back to the 380 thing. What's most impressive about playing 380 is not that he was ever doing it, but when he was doing it, he was playing we have it on pretty good record. He was actually gaining slowly weight throughout the season last year and was playing like he probably started the season at like 365, 370 and got up to like 380 by the time they were playing in the playoffs in, early on New Year's. Which like guys, especially the big fellas in the NFL and in college, you don't do that. You got to be built different to be able to gain weight and not lose weight. So he's somebody that, and I think he has a quote from earlier in the draft process saying like, I'm not somebody that can sit around on the couch for a week or I'll eat 30 pounds worth of weight and put it on. Like that's, just the way that you're built. You got to watch what you eat. You got to watch how in shape you're staying with your physicality. But as for the snap count thing, there's a number of context important points that you can make that people aren't making because they either are too shallow to recognize them or because they're pushing a narrative. Here's the reality. Yes, just 35.9 snaps per game on average in college, but a couple of extenuating circumstances. First of all, the Texas Longhorns, and you can talk to anybody that covers Texas and knows anything about Texas football, they run a pretty unique hockey style rotation with their defensive front, partially because that's the way that they just want to, throw fresh bodies, and partially because they've got enough talented depth on their team. They've got enough talented tackles to constantly be throwing in there and trust to be rotational players and play a lot of snaps. There were also the blowouts. Like, I don't know if people noticed this. Texas was a pretty good football team last year. They went to they were one of the top 4 teams by way of the committee by the end of the year and played in the playoff. So they won 7 games last year by 17 or more points. Starters don't typically play all of those games. In fact, a lot of the time they play like half the game. And if you look at the snap count by game for Sweat, you'll notice, hey, in the first half of the season where they were blowing out a lot of teams, he wasn't playing as much. And then it became much more consistently in the 35, 40, 45 snaps per game range as they came down the final stretch and were playing some of their more important games. If you take the other guys in his range at defensive tackle in this class and just compare the snap counts in 2023, because everybody's making a big deal about, whoa. Can you take this guy that only played 35-ish snaps per game in the second round? Well, here's some other guys that were taken in the first or second round of this draft and their snap counts last year. Devondre Sweat had 503 in 2023. Braden Fisk went right after him at 444. His teammate Byron Murphy, a first-round pick, 16th overall, 438, almost 70 snaps fewer last year. Chris Jenkins out of Michigan, who went in the second round, 418 snaps. Michael Hall, 413 snaps out of Ohio State. Out of Ohio State. And then Ruhnke Orhoro, who went before him earlier in the second round, 409 snaps, almost 100 less snaps in 2023. So this idea that the snap count's a huge red flag. If it is for him, it has to be for these other guys. And the only reason why you are mentioning it with him and not the others is because of his weight. That's not fair. I really don't think that it is. And the second thing about being a 3-down player, when I say a guy is a 3-down capable player from a draft valuation standpoint, it has just as much to do with the skill set that they have as it has to do with their conditioning and their ability to stay in the game. Do I think he's going to come in and play 90% of the defensive snaps for the Titans? No, I don't, because he is still 350, 60, 70, 80 pounds. That's not like physically, that's just the trade-off there for that size. I think that's pretty fair to say. Find me the guy in NFL history playing at, 3.5 bills that's playing 90% of it, playing 60, 70 snaps a game. And then we can talk. I don't think that guy exists off the top of my head. Number two, hey, Jeffrey Simmons, like last year, I think he played like 67% of the Titan snaps. Like he was not in there even 70% of the time. So, there's that. These guys are going to rotate and stay fresh in there. But more importantly than all of that, the skill set element of this is when I say a guy can be a 3-down player, that is half his conditioning and half, does he have the requisite skill set to be in on pass obvious downs as well as run obvious downs? And with T'Vondre Sweat, the answer is a resounding yes. He is a really, really strong player with a lot of high-end traits as a pass rusher that will lend themselves to him being a nasty 3-down capable player who you're not taking off on 3rd down because he doesn't have the skills to be out there and he's just your glorified run stuffer. He's your Tierra Tart. You need to get some guys in there that are going to get after the quarterback. No, if you're not worried about the snap count situation with him or with anybody else, you keep him in there on 3rd down because he is going to be one of your best players that is going to dominate the inside of the line, be a force multiplier for Jeffrey Simmons on the front, which we'll talk about more in just a second. And he's going to get after the quarterback really well as in addition to being an immovable run stuffer, which he's also going to be fantastic at. So that's why I'm so confident he, despite his snap count in college, is a 3-down capable player in the NFL, and that is a lazy, poor talking point.
Jacob in the comments says, do you have an NFL comp for Sweat? And I think Ryan in the comments says has the most likely one that I've seen, which is Vita Vea is one that comes to mind for sure.
Yeah.
That guy,
that's the upside pick right there.
Like you said, that really just, is that run stuffing, huge, big body guy that we saw last year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in that game against the Titans, where he was just absolutely unstoppable. And I think that's what you can really see from him in this in this kind of system that they're running now. And I think that you did a good job explaining why, for some of the reasons why, or debunking why Sweat could play three downs in a series and not just be a 2-down player. But there is still this big element of his game that is the attitude and the off the field concerns for him, which I think do make him a bigger gamble than some of these other players. So would you say that it isn't a gamble?
So I was texting with a friend the morning after the Titans made this pick, and he was just picking my brain on the draft. And at one point he asked, so do you, we were talking about Sweat. He said, you don't think that T'Vondre Sweat was a huge gamble for the Titans? And I had to sit and I thought about it, trying to think of what the fair way to respond to that is, because the answer is not no. Like this was a safe pick. It wasn't a gamble at all. Ultimately my answer was and is that I actually think Sweat was the biggest gamble the Titans made, and there's really no argument. Like I think of all the 7 picks they made, he was the biggest gamble. I would not categorize picking him there as something that you can call a safe pick. It was not, it was not the like picking Johnny Newton there, if he was more their flavor, would have been a safer pick. But I feel pretty confident that the Titans think they came out of this draft with their preferred tackle and their preferred offensive and defensive tackle with their first 2 picks. I think that he was their flavor. And as we mentioned earlier, was a fantastic fit for them. But just because something is a gamble doesn't make it inherently a bad idea. And, I think most folks see this as a far riskier pick than I do, and far riskier than the data on Sweat dictates that it is, like we've lined up so far in terms of the actual on-field situation. So just because it was their biggest roll of the dice, I guess is what I'm saying, it doesn't mean that it was a bad pick. I think it was a good bet that they made. That's the fair and balanced way to approach the analysis of this pick. So while it was a gamble, it wasn't one that was irresponsible. It wasn't a bad one, in my opinion, based on my knowledge of the player. And I don't think the consensus media situation was as in tune with the consensus NFL perception of Sweat. I think he would have, if the Titans hadn't got him at 38, I would be pretty surprised if he had fell out of the top 50, despite so many boards like Dan Brugler having him as the, 35th, 38th best player in the draft. And then the DWI, they'd bump him down outside the top 100. I think that was just always an overreaction. Another thing is the Titans, speaking to the gamble element to this, they made it clear that they laid out clear, firm expectations for him. He's likely to have in his contract fines for certain weight goals. Like if he gets overweight and does not keep himself conditioned and watch what he eats and all of these things, it's going to be costly to him. And so like there's incentive there. They also, as everybody knows, went down after they met with him. They were the first team that met with him for a 30 visit post the DUI. It was like the day after it happened, 2 days after it happened. So he explained that to them there. And then they set a coalition of guys down to his hometown and stayed with him and learned about his family and learned about him and his situation and just got to know the guy and set out those clear expectations for, hey, if we draft you, this is what we're looking for. There's also the Jeffrey Simmons element to this, JT. And Simmons is a guy that came into the league with some off the field red flags. Maybe not concerns, but like there were things on draft night that, you know, I've got friends that are huge Mississippi State fans who were outraged the night of the draft because on the ESPN broadcast, as they like to do, you know, the meme about like this guy's the 6th overall pick. He won the Heisman Trophy. And let me tell you about all the terrible things he did in high school is the first thing out of my mouth. Like that was what happened to Jeffrey Simmons. There were things in his past in high school and some domestic situations that were staining his resume, and maybe a big part of the reason why he fell to the Titans. Simmons obviously overcame that and has become an incredible NFL player and an incredible off the field person. He's an adult. He's a grown up. He's a good guy. I give him a thumbs up. Good guy. I know him well enough to know that. I don't know if there's a better situation for him to fall into, Devondre Sweat, that is, than being mentored by Jeffrey Simmons, because he knows exactly the path that Sweat needs to take in order to shake those concerns coming out of college and be the guy he needs to be in the NFL. Grow up in the spotlight, grow up with a lot of money, grow up with a high expectation for you coming into the league. And Simmons, I think he understands the assignment here. I think he knows that at least this offseason, it is up to him to take this guy under his wing, to babysit him a little bit, for lack of a better term. And then there's other guys on this defensive front, like, you know, Keandre Coburn, his former teammate out of Texas. He's going to be on the roster at least through the summer and into the fall to be a good influence for him. So they've got a support system for a guy that needs to do some growing up that I think is going to lend itself to him being impressive and you know, not be, you know, Isaiah Wilson jumping off of balconies in the middle of August. One last thing. We mentioned the Outland Trophy, which again is the best interior lineman, according to the Football Writers of America. That association hands out this award to the best interior offensive or defensive lineman in college. And since 2010, here's the list of guys on the defensive side of the ball that have won that award. You got Devondre Sweat this past year, Jordan Davis, the Eagle, out of Georgia in 2021, Quinnen Williams out of I forget where he goes to school, but regardless, 2018 was Quinnen Williams, Ed Oliver with the Bills 2017, and Aaron Donald in 2013. I don't know, man. It's a pretty good list. It's a pretty strong list. So like, I think there's a decent track record there as well. So that's all. Those are all my thoughts on the element of a gamble with this pick. Is it a gamble? Yes. Am I super concerned about it? Not really. Do I think it was a smart decision? I do.
Now, all those things are nice and well, but
sure.
Is there a way that this really does blow up in their face? Let's say that, you know, he does end up being that 2-down player who, you know, plays around 370. There are some off the field issue things that end up, you know, causing maybe some distractions during the next season where there is an outcome where the Titans may be, you know, 3-7, 3-8, and there is an incident or two. Is that a possibility? And is that the outcome where you say that this really was a big miss in the second round?
Yeah, it's easy to see how this messes up. You know, if he's just a head case and they can't get him to grow up, then that's going to be a failure. If he is, you know, even if he grows up, but he can't keep his weight down, or he can't keep his conditioning up, which are, you know, intertwined. And he's not able to play more than 30, 35 snaps a game. And he, you know, or he doesn't develop as a pass rusher, and become a guy that they want out there on third down. It'd be fine if he's out there on third down, but we'd prefer to have this guy out there for other reasons. Like, those are the ways that he fails. And those are the ways that everybody that doesn't like the pick are pointing out. And, you know, they could come to fruition. I'm not saying that they can't. I just, for the reasons we just spent the past half hour discussing, I don't think that they will.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Just the way that he, with Jeffrey Simmons also in the building, and this kind of support system from the call, the call with them, from the get go, seemed like
Mhm.
this is a guy that they really want to mold because they know the kind of talent that he has at the next level, and what he can become at that next level. One question here from in the chat. Um, Josh says, I think the sweat pick can work out, but do you think, given the state of this roster, it was wise to take such a risk at 38, given there might have been, there was a Cooper DeJean on the board still, or a Kool-Aid McKinstry, or another wide receiver on the board there?
Yeah, I think we talked about that a lot in the pre-draft process, and I think that's absolutely a fair question and a fair concern. And I from a pure process standpoint, maybe it wasn't the smartest decision possible. Maybe going for a safer option would have been better for this team long term. But I think it lends itself to a couple of decisions they've made this offseason so far that point towards this team's wanting to compete sooner than later. They think that Will Levis is the guy, and they think that they can get this thing jump started and they can accelerate their progress to be a contending team within 1 year. And if that's the case, you're going after guys like JC Latham and Tavondre Sweat, not trading down. You're getting your blue chip top of their position guys in the draft because you're looking for impact players now. And so, like I said previously, yes, is it a gamble? Yes. And as to Josh's point, is it maybe not the best decision based on the state of their roster? I think it's fair to argue it's not. But that's based on a perception of this team's not that close. And clearly, I think they think they're closer. And based on that, then your process does have to change and it reflects more of this. So, they're ultimately going to be judged in the end on that, if, by whether or not they're right that they can contend soon. And if they are wrong, then this pick is going to look bad because of that. Even if Sweat ends up being a good player, you're going to look back and say, man, they got lucky because that process was not great.
Ken also asks in the comments, do you think another vet defensive tackle is needed? Possibly someone who could help with keeping Sweat on the straight and narrow. Someone like Calais Campbell to rotate in the middle, I think would be great.
So they need more guys like, behind Simmons and Sweat. It's Keandre Coburn. Oh, I forget. Sebastian
Sebastian
Joseph Day.
Joseph.
Yeah. I'm so sorry, Sebastian. I've not met him yet or heard from him yet. So he's out of sight, out of mind for me so far. I'm sure I'll get used to that in a little bit. But yeah, it's those three guys, and then the Keandre Coburns of the world, guys that may not really be NFL rosterable guys. So they need depth there, and I won't be shocked if they add some veteran depth, but they may be content to just roll with what they've got and be thin at that position and bank on those top guys. It would be a liability for them going into the season that is liable to bite them by week 6, week 7.
Alrighty, let's move on to the 4th round pick here, where Cedric Gray, the linebacker out of North Carolina, kind of filled one of those other immediate needs for the Titans and was a guy that we both thought was a really good possibility for the Titans. Ends up is the other guy that we are able to hit on in this 4th and 5th round. Let's talk about him and how he could play into a role here in Tennessee.
Right. So Cedric Gray, and we're gonna we've spent a half hour on each of these first couple guys. We're gonna speed it up as we go. Do a little bit more of a skim job on these guys later in the rounds because there is less to
Skim
say.
job.
Yeah, don't write that down. So here's an introduction to Cedric Gray. One of two guys. The next two picks we're going to talk about were guys that I tweeted out from our do and don't draft guide list for day 3 ahead of the Saturday proceedings and said, would love for these guys to be Titans. And we hit on 2 of them. The first of which is Cedric Gray, who's only 21 years old, a 3-star recruit coming out of high school, has receiver, kick returner, and basketball background in high school. And he was the only Power 5 player to average double-digit tackles per game in both 2022 and 2023. Looking at his seasons, in 21, he led the team in tackles. All of his seasons, by the way, spent with the University of North Carolina. He led the team in tackles in 2021, started the final 11 games that year and became a full-time starter from there on. In 2022, he had 145 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 3 forced fumbles, 8 passes defended, and 2 interceptions, was first team All-ACC, led the ACC in tackles, and led the team in forced fumbles and tackles for loss. And then he had an encore performance in 2023, playing in all 12 of their games that season as well. 121 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, so increased his impact on the quarterback significantly in his last year. 2 forced fumbles, 5 passes defended, and 1 interception. He was first team All ACC again, led the team in tackles and forced fumbles again, and he ended up missing the bowl game as an opt-out at the end of the year. Measures at 6'1" and change, 234 pounds. Some strengths listed in Dan Brugler's scouting report. Solidly built for the position with proportionate arm length, above average speed to run down ball carriers to the sideline, always around the ball, flashing short area bursts into gaps, outstanding tackle production, terrific awareness and reaction quickness in zone coverage. That's a big deal. We'll talk more about his ability to cover in a moment. Responsible for 11 forced turnovers, 6 forced fumbles, and 5 interceptions over the last 3 seasons in college. Was a multi-year team captain in high school, 3 years, and in college, 2 years. The UNC defensive coordinator and linebacker coach Tommy Thigpen said of Gray, is an alpha male who loves football, crazy aggressive with a huge football IQ, experienced on special teams with 587 career snaps there, and he's durable. His 2023 opt-out from the bowl game was the first missed game of his entire college career. Some weaknesses here. He's mediocre in terms of play strength, and he needs to develop his bulk. Struggles to shed once he locks horns with a blocker, can be fooled when his sight lines are muddied, and does not have the recovery speed to make up ground after a misstep, and he can be outpaced on wheels and seam routes when asked to match routes in man coverage. Overall, the summary is that Gray may not be exceptional in any one area, but he's equal parts athletic and aggressive and is always in the vicinity of the football. He projects as a rotational NFL linebacker and special teamer who will compete for starting reps as a rookie. And Dane had him as a 4th round grade, where the Titans ultimately got him.
Yeah, I think that's where you can start the conversation, right? Dane thinks that and that's what we kind of talked about him. Gray doesn't have any super trait that makes him stand out, right? His 4.64 40 time, you can see that in the weaknesses there where, that recovery speed just isn't there. But, there's not a lot of knocks on his in the weakness section of where, his vision of the field is truly subpar. Of course, there are things the offense is always going to do to try to mess you up. And those are things that, may not be his fault entirely or things like that. But even though he is a 4th round grade here, what makes Cedric Gray such a strong contender to be a day 1 starter as a 4th round pick and potentially wear that green dot on the Titans defense?
Right. Like with 4th round players of any kind, you're not typically super confident they'll be a 1st round or a day 1 starter on a football team. And if you are, it's usually because your team sucks. Now, in this case, a big part of it is because the Titans linebacker situation sucks. And so like that's, it's going to be he landed with one of the better situations in the entire league to fast track him to be a starter on day 1. He's also got that green dot ability, and that's the biggest thing here. You go back in the profile and you listen to his coach Tommy Thigpen saying he's got crazy huge football IQ. He's an alpha male. He loves football, and he's got, as Dane put it, terrific awareness and reaction quickness in zone coverage. He is the coverage reliable linebacker that the Titans desperately need, and because of that, I think that he's going to be at least going into camp, the number 1 he's going to be in the pole position on that second inside linebacker starting job, and it's going to be his to lose.
Yeah, and I think that there is a possibility, to play devil's advocate, that he needs time to develop. And Kenneth says that, and this was reported earlier this week, that Amani Hooker has apparently spoken up about wanting a shot at the green dot if they were to go that route where the green dot is not necessarily a Mike style linebacker in their kind of coverage. If that were the case, if Amani Hooker tries it out and he also maybe doesn't end up for what it is and Cedric Gray's not ready, could this be a thing where they once again do not really have a guy to truly wear that green dot going into the season? And look at some of the other guys who are on the board there, talk about some of the wide receivers, some of the tackle depth that was still there that makes this pick maybe a little bit of a reach.
I don't think so. Like, Amani Hooker speaking up, that came after one of Rand Carthen's press conferences this spring where he said they're not necessarily needing the linebacker to do the job. You could have a player in the secondary wear the green dot. Like, it's possible for other positions to wear the green dot. And so he spoke up and said, "Let me give it a try, coach." He's a veteran on this defense, one of the few veterans that they have that have been with the Titans for a long time. He's going to know it as well as anybody else, and he's a smart guy, so I think he's capable of handling that. They have options. Like, that's what I see this as, is they've got at least one, but arguably two or more guys on this roster who are capable of being a bona fide green dot quarterback of the defense. And that's a good thing. They need that. And so while I still think Gray is the most likely to do it because he's the young player who's going to be here for the next 4 years at least, and he's got the upside to be that guy, and if they believe, like they said in the press conference, he's got the smarts to do it, they're going to let him try. I won't be shocked if it's him or a guy like Amani Hooker, but regardless, I don't think him being the green dot or not is going to be what keeps him out of being that starting coverage linebacker, that Mike style linebacker. I think that's going to be his job to lose regardless of what's on his helmet.
All right, let's move on to the 5th round pick and my favorite Titans draft pick, because this is a guy that I've loved since the Senior Bowl. Jarvis Brownlee Jr., absolute dog out of Louisville, the cornerback with the 146th pick. Tell us about him.
Yeah, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., 3-star recruit coming out of high school, spent 3 years at FSU before entering the transfer portal over an NIL dispute, spent his final 2 seasons at Louisville, voted the top cornerback on the American team during Senior Bowl practice, and had an interception in the game. In 2022, he was the top pass defender on Louisville. He enrolled in the school that season and came in swinging. Played all 13 games, 66 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 14 passes defended, and 2 interceptions. In 2023, he was an honorable mention for All-ACC. He did miss 3 games with a foot, however, played in just 9 of their 11 games, had 30 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 7 passes defended, and 1 interception. The measurements here are why he fell to the 5th round, right? A little bit undersized for the position. 5'10" and change, 194 pounds, ran a 4.5 140 at his pro day. So not great, not bad, but standard for, you're going to take that in the 5th round for your cornerbacks. His strengths here, NFL scouts have raved about his ultra competitive and aggressive playing demeanor. This dude is so tenacious. He is so aggressive. He's so fun to watch play football. He looks to reroute receivers off the snap and has better press strength and lateral bursts than expected. Moves with twitch in his feet to quickly change directions on jump routes, natural hand-eye coordination to make confident catches away from his body, has a quick trigger to pounce and close on ball carriers in front of him, never backs down from blockers, makes it a point to get in the head of receivers and beat them up physically and mentally, played on all punt coverages each of his 5 seasons in college, offers experience in the slot as a nickel. Some weaknesses: lacks desired size for the position, as we mentioned. NFL receivers might find success flipping his aggressive tendencies with baiting tactics. Feisty play style that he has, it lends itself to downfield contact and some flags. Inconsistent ball tracking and finishing skills on the deep end. Zay Flowers got the best of him in 2022, for example. And he missed 3 games and parts of others during his senior season because of a nagging right foot injury that was it was in October 2023 when he sustained that. In summary, Brugler says that overall Brownlee's aggressive nature will be a double-edged sword versus seasoned NFL athletes, but his movement skills and competitive toughness will be attractive qualities for defensive coordinators. He has the right mentality to play special teams and compete for a starting nickel role early in his career, has shades of Kobe Durant. Grades him as a 3rd or 4th round prospect, and that's where I thought he was going to go. I tweeted out in, I think, late February, early March, that if a team gets him on day 3, I think he'll be the steal of day 3. I'm not sure he's going to land on day 3, and the Titans get him in the 5th round, a full 40, 50 picks into day 3. They land him in the 5th. They got a steal in Brownlee Jr., in my opinion. I love this guy.
I do too, and I think another element of why we like him so much is because he fits that kind of mold that defensive coordinator Jannard Wilson loves his secondary players to have. So let's talk about that. What does make him such a good fit for that role?
Brownlee at some point, I don't know who or where, I need to go find this, but he told somebody that he views a certain player on the Tennessee Titans roster already as like the guy he looks up to. JT, any idea who that might be?
It's L'Jarius Sneed.
It's L'Jarius Sneed. If you watch the guy play, you're seeing shades of a just like smaller, a little bit less athletic, a little bit fast, a little bit less fast guy. In Jarvis Brownlee Jr. Like that's the play style that he embodies. He is so tenacious. He is. I think it was our buddy James who pointed out that like clearly the Titans are trying to build a defense that's never going to let any receiver, any day, any game get off the line of scrimmage ever. Like they're just going to be the biggest bullies in press coverage. They're going to jam the fool out of these kids and not let them run routes. That's like sign Jarvis Brownlee Jr. up for that. That's what he does, baby. That's his whole thing. He is so aggressive and plays like he is a bigger, faster, stronger athlete. And he like it works for him. He knows how to use his size and throw it around. And he's got impressive play speed and play strength despite the measurements. So he's an incredible fit for Denard Wilson's defense. I think that he embodies the ethos that they're going for kind of dead on.
He is a dog, but it's more of like that, like a Chihuahua who thinks he's the alpha in a room of like Dobermans or German Shepherds, right? Like
no, it's more than that. It's like, what's a dog that's small in stature, but you underestimate them, and if you mess with it, it's gonna mess you up. Like it's like
a terrier, maybe.
A what?
Like a terrier, like a
maybe. I don't know. It's like he's like a baby hyena. It's like look at the cute little guy, and then you piss it off, and it'll end you. It'll wreck you. It will mess you up. Yes. That's what Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is to me. I don't know. We'll workshop that. That comp needs some work, but we're gonna figure it out.
And Jacob says L'Jarius needs new Padawan, basically.
Yeah, man. Yes.
And I think that kind of gets into the reason why we think that, drafting a cornerback in the 5th round there, which really since getting Chidobe Awuzie and, trading for L'Jarius Sneed really wasn't the biggest need for this team anymore. So why draft one when they already had starters?
Yeah, they've got 3 great starters on this team. But you know what they had after that? Trey Avery. Like that, that's where you're sitting at cornerback 4. And that's not the place you want to be. This move, while it wasn't the biggest pressing need, at least in terms of starters the Titans had in the 5th round of this draft, it raises the floor on their cornerback depth tremendously. And it bridges a pretty significant gap between the top 3 starters and the rest of the guys on the roster. Brownlee being your 4th guy makes you feel so much better when you inevitably lose one of these starters. And you will. Like every team, your cornerback in particular is a position where you're gonna deal with some triage. You're gonna deal with some guys coming in and out of the lineup on Sundays. And with Brownlee being that 4th guy, that makes me feel a lot better about where they are than having to roll out a Trey Avery, for example.
Yeah, and I think that's where we can now move to the 6th round, and where, with all of these guys, the devil advocate, kind of trade-off here is what was the value left on the board, considering the players that were still there. And the biggest one, which you gave, I believe, a C+, C- to this.
Something like that. I'll check. I think it was a C+.
But taking Jaquan Jackson at
C-. Sorry,
C-, taking Jaquan Jackson at 182 in the 6th round, when there were guys that we and the rest of the gang on our day 3 live stream liked better, like a Malik Washington. They were still on the board, but Jaquan Jackson is part of this team, so we're going to talk about him. What give us his profile rundown.
I hate that. Jaquan Jackson is a part of this team, so whether we like it or not, we don't hate Jaquan Jackson. I'm looking forward to meeting the guy. I'm looking forward to having him prove me wrong and make me look so stupid. Please go and do it, Jaquan, if you happen to be listening to this. But I have to be honest, and Jaquan Jackson, wide receiver, Tulane at 182 overall. Let's just start with the introduction here. 3-star recruit, played at FCS Jackson State before transferring to Tulane his junior year. He's the nephew of Ed Reed, so there's a little pedigree. College roommates with Tyjae Spears, who he calls a brother from another mother. Those guys, huge fans of one another. Tyjae, we saw him. We were surprised because he passed us on the concourse at the Senior Bowl. He walks past, and I'm like, that's definitely Tyjae. Like, I should have said, hey, but I was like, I'm not expecting to see you down here in January. You're in the NFL. Like, what are you doing? He was there for his buddy Jaquan Jackson. He was at Jaquan Jackson's draft party when he got picked, and when he went on a Zoom call with the Titans media, Tyjae was there in the background talking to the guys. Like, it's a dream come true for these guys to be on the same team. So that element of this is so cool. Let's look at his profile from college here. In 2022, he had his best year. 33 receptions, 554 yards as a receiver, 16.8 yards per catch, 3 touchdowns, and 2 drops. Second team all AAC that season, and had a 90-yard punt return touchdown to cap it all off. In 2023, had a similar year of production, but a little bit less than the year before. Missed 3 games in total with an ankle injury. That's a big part of why the production took a little bit of a dip. And he missed his bowl game as an opt-out, though he did compete at the Senior Bowl. Measurements wise, he is small. He is a small, speedy receiver, 5'9" and change, 188 pounds, but he runs a 4.42. He does come in, by the way, with a 32-inch vertical jump and a 9-foot 10-inch broad jump, which I mentioned because while he is small, he is fast, but he lacks explosiveness. He's not a super explosive athlete in that way. Some strengths listed by Brugler in the Athletics, the Beast article here, guide rather. Field fast and quickly gets on top of coverage vertically, sinks and transitions his weight with control out of his brakes, tracks the ball well and secures without slowing at the catch point, and he's an experienced return man and had a 90-yard punt return touchdown in 2022, averaged 10.8 yards per punt return and 20.9 yards per kick return in that season. Focused on and off the field and has never shied away from hard work. Some weaknesses here. Smaller frame with below average height, length, and bulk. He struggles to fend off jams at the line of scrimmage. Not much of a tackle breaker. Battled injuries. Missed 3 games, hampered in several others by an ankle injury from October of last year. Tore his labrum during 2020 fall camp, but played through it and had to consistently pop his shoulder back in during games. Surgery came after that season on his shoulder, and then a torn MCL the last game of his junior season in high school in December of 2017. So dealt with a significant number of injuries in his playing career. In summary, Brugler says he tracks the ball well with soft hands, but lacks the frame, body strength, or length to consistently outduel defenders on 50-50 passes. Overall, Jackson is undersized and needs to stay off the injury report, but he offers both long speed and short area quickness, along with the route instincts to create pockets of separation for his quarterback. He projects as an NFL slot with day one value as a punt returner.
Yeah, I think that's where we can start our conversation, though. When you look at some of the guys who are still on the board, Malik Washington being one, the fit may have not been the same, but Johnny Wilson is there. Taj Washington is also there.
Mm-hmm.
Why does Tennessee go this route?
Yeah, that's the question that left us scratching our heads when they made it on Saturday, and when we were live, we weren't quite sure what to make of this decision. Jill Morris in the comments asks if you could change one pick, who would you have selected? No trades and available at that spot. It's Malik Washington there. It's Johnny Wilson there. It's maybe even like a Cornelius Johnson there out of Michigan. Like, as you mentioned, Taj Washington. I find those guys much more intriguing than a Jaquan Jackson, if I'm being honest. And the reason they made the pick is pretty clear. Like, I've seen some folks being like, whoa, well, this puts Kyle Phillips in the hot seat. I don't know, man. I don't buy that. Like, I'll change my mind on that in camp. And like, listen, if Kyle once again hurts himself 2 seconds into the season, then yeah, it's going to be Jaquan Jackson season. But until then, I don't think from a talent standpoint that's going to happen. What I think it actually does, and the point of the pick, it's pretty clear they wanted a returner. They wanted a guy that has dual returnability. They said that that's what they see in this guy when they talked about him in the press conference after the pick. They want a guy that can return, and that's something that Kyle Phillips has shown. He's worked his way out of that conversation because he has muffed too many punts and been too unavailable. With the new kickoff return rules, maybe they see him as a uniquely viable candidate to be the kickoff returner as well as their punt returner and just be that specialist. Keep him on the roster as wide receiver 6 or 7, and he's your punt return guy and offers plus a value in that regard. But he muffed 6 kicks in college too. I need to go see it. I'm guessing that's over his college career. I don't think that was all in one season, but like he's been known to drop a kick or two. And so maybe he's this star returner that they see and I don't, and then I will eat my words. But I'm not crazy about that, and I think the vision is blurry at best.
Yeah, and I think that's where I, once again, coming into play devil's advocate and answer that question. When you have him come off the board and then Malik Washington with the next pick, literally the pick right after Jaquan Jackson, Miami also released a video where They make the call to Malik Washington, where basically the GM says, "Hey, McDaniel has been wanting me to pick you for the last like 3 rounds. It's gonna make me so sick when he is just a
He's
star
gonna be
at the
good,
next
man.
level." And maybe he just wouldn't fit what Tennessee wants, but man,
He
just
would, though. I'm not buying it. He so would. If Jaquan Jackson does, Malik Washington freaking does, man.
I think so too. That it's gonna be such a tough look once again to see him on the board. There are a lot of connections though
Jaquan,
with
prove us wrong, buddy.
Jaquan.
Please
I
prove us
really
wrong.
do, but from a talent perspective, it feels like there were a lot more outside effects that led to this pick more than just the talent and who was on the board.
Yeah, and that's, the context of the pick is always going to follow him. Worst case is like a Des Fitzpatrick, Amon-Ra St. Brown situation, which the Titans know all too well. Do I think that's going to be the case? Like, we'll see about that. If Malik Washington is getting, highest paid receiver in the league contract in 4 years, then we'll have that discussion. I promise. But it's a tough situation. And generally speaking, taking a undersized marginal athlete that is very fast but lacks explosiveness and is a slot only player as a receiver in the late rounds, you're throwing darts, and that's not the profile I'm wanting to throw darts at personally. But again, we'll see if he proves us wrong.
Alrighty, and let's move to the last 2 guys here, starting with their 242 pick, James Williams, the safety out of Miami. Give us a rundown of his what is that finger for?
Go ahead. I'll explain it.
Oh, okay. His draft profile. Give us a rundown.
There we go. Yeah, here's the rundown. And you say the finger is for the safety designation, which he technically is and did in college, but we're gonna make it pretty obvious here in a minute. That's not what he's gonna do for the Titans. He's a linebacker. Here's the introduction, though. 5-star recruit out of high school, number 1 safety in the 2021 recruiting class, and number 4 overall recruit in all of Florida, behind his new teammate J.C. Latham, by the way, who I think was the number 1 recruit in Florida that year. Only 21 years old, so very young, ranked 5th best in terms of fit for the Titans amongst the linebackers by Zach Lyon's Titans fit model. In 2023, his final season, he played 12 out of 12 games, 73 tackles, had half a tackle for loss, 2 forced fumbles, 6 passes defended, and 1 interception, led the team in forced fumbles, and he missed the bowl game as an opt-out player. Measurements, perfectly fine. 6'4" and change, 231 pounds. Some strengths listed here in the beast. Tall, stretched out frame and outstanding length. Explosive first step out of his transitions. Shows functional zone cover skills. Can carry tight ends across the field. Aggressive striker and goes for the thumping hit when it's available. Length makes it tough for passers to layer the ball over him. Was a regular on punt return and coverage teams. Versatile experience and played multiple roles, 2 high, single high, box, safety in college. And he started 30 games in his time with the Hurricanes. Some weaknesses: long striding speed, but struggles to close ground in man coverage or pursuit. So he's got more long speed than he does short area quickness. Inconsistent react awareness from the post, has some wild take-on skills with too much wasted movements when attempting to punch off blocks. Finishing strength, I can't read anymore. I'm seeing cross-eyed. Finishing strength is average at best, and physical NFL runners will run through his arm tackles. Energetic play quickly becomes undisciplined. 17 penalties in his career with 3 face masks and 9 personal foul or unnecessary roughness flags. Played part of his sophomore season with a torn labrum in his left shoulder and had off-season surgery in December of 22. Suffered a season-ending groin injury as a freshman in November of 21, which required surgery, and his combine medicals revealed scar tissue on his right groin muscle, which sidelined him for his pro day. In summary, Brugler writes that overall Williams is more of a tweener athlete than a seasoned football player, but he's a full-throttle enforcer with a unique skill set that will intrigue several NFL defensive coordinators. He projects best in a robber cover 3 scheme and offers versatility in sub packages to blitz or match tight ends. So Brugler had him listed as a linebacker. And if you look at the athletic testing for him, the last thing I'll say before we get to some fake questions, real answers here, is that as a safety, Williams' RAS, relative athletic score, was a 4.63. Very, very strong size for a safety, but very poor explosiveness, very poor speed grade. When you grade him as a linebacker, though, which is where he's playing linebacker. The Titans, when they put out the picture of him, they listed him as James Williams, linebacker. It changes significantly. He goes from a 4.63 RAS to a 7.42. His size is still good. He's a little bit underweight for a linebacker, but his speed becomes average, slightly above average, and his explosiveness is fine. So that's something to keep in mind when you talk about, this Titans class. It's unathletic like that. That's one element of this that I think isn't being reported very well.
Yeah, and I think that's where we get into this, right? You're bringing in this James Williams, maybe a later dart throw for the Titans, but what does it tell you about the linebacker depth that was already there and the need for them to double down in this draft class?
Yeah, man, this was a good weekend for the incumbent Titans receivers. Very bad weekend for the incumbent Titans linebackers. It tells you that, James Williams being a dart throw of theirs in the 7th, who can be a rotational player, a special teams ace out of the gate. It puts guys like Dr. Jack Gibbons and who am I missing?
Otis Reese.
Otis Reese. Thank you, Otis Reese. Puts them on notice. Like, we've got 2 guys in this draft class that are younger than you. They are guys that we intentionally just picked, and we're looking to keep them on the roster by any means necessary. And we think that they have the skills to give you a run for your money at this position and knock you down a peg or 2 or 3 on the depth chart. So I think it tells you that they consider the linebacker situation a bad one as is, and they brought in 2 guys they think that can help that.
Yeah, and with Williams kind of being this tweener athlete, not really checking either the fully linebacker box or a safety box, but having a lot of good coverage skills. How do you think he fits into Denard's vision for this defense?
He and a number of these other guys point towards what we talked about earlier this weekend, how the vision for the Titans defense as a whole pretty clearly is that they're wanting to max out the extremes, right? They have really shored up their interior pass rush and run defensibility with Jeffrey Simmons and Devondre Sweat, and they have really shored up their cornerback situation with 3 bona fide stud starters on the outside. That allows the spine of their defense, their edge rushers, their linebackers, outside linebackers and inside linebackers, their safeties, to play fast and physical and reactive, because when you are able to defend the run with light boxes, because you've got 2 massive human beings on the inside and you don't have to attribute more help to the run defense on a regular basis. You can have faith in those 2 in a light box to get by if a run hits you when you weren't expecting it. And then you're able to cover 3 deep to a man in man or zone coverage on the outside and not worry about the safeties having to hover in too high all the time and babysit over the top and play conservative and play prevent. That allows you to do some unique things with the spine of your defense and get downhill. And a guy like James Williams with that tweener body has experience playing safety in college. It's going to be used more as a linebacker or a box safety at the next level by the Titans. They can utilize him in different ways without having to worry about, well, we can't have this guy on the field because we got to have 2 strong coverage players. They're going to sit high and babysit over the top. And so that's where he fits into the puzzle of this vision the Titans defense, I think, has going forward.
And then finally, the last player the Titans drafted with one of their 7 picks that they had this year, Jalen Harrell, edge defender out of Michigan. Talk to us about him, because he's a really interesting case, falling to the last pick before, the compensatory picks this year. If there weren't any compensatory picks, he would be the last guy. But his stats are pretty promising.
Yeah, if I were to fall in love with the 7th round pick, it's this guy. It's Jalen Harrell. Like, I'm ready to be burned by being overzealous with his potential, his be overvaluing what he could potentially be come August, and we realize, okay, let's pump the brakes. But for now, let's pump the gas a little bit on Jalen Harrell, who has a baseball and track athlete background from high school, was a 3-star recruit coming out. His father, James, was a linebacker who walked on at Florida in college before playing a lengthy pro career with the Lions, Chiefs, and the original USFL's Tampa Bay Bandits in the late 70s and 80s. Electric. 3-time academic all Big Ten honoree out of Michigan, obviously. If we didn't mention that, he played on a national championship team last year. So he's been around some really high caliber players in his time, ranked 3rd best fit amongst edge players in this entire draft class. 3rd best by Zach Lyon's Titans fit model. And he had a pass rush win rate of 20.7% last year, which was fourth highest in the entire class. If you look at his numbers the last 2 seasons, actually, in 2022, the one thing to note is he did miss one game that year. Did not miss any in this national championship run in 2023. Played 15 out of 15 games, 31 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and a pass defended. Was an honorable mention All Big Ten player, and he led Michigan, the national champions, in sacks and tackles for loss last year. Measurables, 6'3" and change, undersized a little bit at 250. Some strengths here, has adequate length, 33 and a fourth inch arms, 81 and an eighth wingspan. He screams off the edge with strong take on and arc speed, converting his initial momentum to power, forcing blockers on their heels, can keep his rush alive with underneath counters, efficient in the stunt game, something the Titans do a lot of. He widens his radar versus the run and stays aware of his contained responsibilities on the edge. Described as the tone setter of the defense by Jim Harbaugh, and earns respect from everyone in the program with his play personality. Added punt coverage to his special teams resume in 2023. Some weaknesses here: he has a tweener frame, a little bit on the undersized side. He's a little bit on the narrow side, narrow, longer, lengthy guy. So he's got some lankiness to him. Mediocre play strength, speed reliant, so blockers know what's coming when he lines up. He's not going to do a whole lot in the power category. An average bender. Most of his pass rush production came unblocked or on cleanup. So kind of as Zach Lyons liked to poke fun at, he's kind of a Harold Landry mold, kind of a cleanup artist at times. Let's see here. Setting a hard edge will be much more challenging versus NFL size and power, something he may struggle with there. And he's not ready to drop back and cover against tight ends or running backs or wide receivers, for that matter, at the pro level. In summary, he isn't built the way NFL teams prefer an every down player, but he plays disciplined as an edge setter and prides himself on being 1 of 11. Overall, Harold lacks fluidity and doesn't fool anyone with his pass rush plan, but he brings a ton of effort and purpose in all areas. He projects as a sub-package NFL rusher, similar in ways to 2021 Pittsburgh Steelers draft pick Quincy Roche. And Dane had a 6th round grade on the Titans pick at 252 in the 7th.
So Jack in the comments says, I think Jalen Harrell has a chance to take Rashad Weaver's spot early on. And then Kenneth also chimes in saying Rashad Weaver versus Caleb Murphy versus Jalen Harrell, which leads perfectly into our discussion. Where do you expect Harrell to fall in this Titans edge rotation and on the kind of, depth chart? And then what is a reasonable ceiling in expectations for a guy who, played on a pretty good defensive line, had that 20.7% pass rush win rate. You talk about Zach Lyons' Titans fit model, the third best in all of this class. What is a relative expectation for him?
So a career ceiling for him, I think, is a fair expectation is to be like what's a good comp for him? Our Arden Key is fair, I think, on the Titans roster here. Like an Arden Key level, borderline every down guy, but really is going to be at his best as a rotational guy. That's a ceiling. Now, is that going to be what they get this year or next? No. Who was it? Jack that pointed out the Rashad Weaver thing. Like that's the competition that he's going to be up against. He's, Harold Landry and Arden Key are the top 2 edge rushers for this team right now. But when you look at Rashad Weaver, when you look at Caleb Murphy, a rookie last year, when you look at, like Thomas Rush, it gets thin in a hurry. And Jalen Harrell is going to be right in that mix. Weaver is the 3rd guy, I think, right now, pretty clearly, with Caleb Murphy being the 4. I think Harrell's going to be pushing for that 3rd or 4th spot on the Titans edge depth chart. And by the end of August, he may have solidified himself as not just a guy that makes the roster as the last pick, almost the last pick in the entire draft, but a guy that is going to be getting snaps. That's the upside here. Now, could he be like last year, everybody and their brother falling in love with? Oh my goodness. Have you seen this kid, Caleb Murphy? I know he comes from a small school, but look at the production, look at the athletic traits, and could it just not quite be there? And at best, he needs a year. Yes, but I think there's a chance that he is the high level variance of that rather than the low level variance.
Right, because you look at, kind of the things you laid out there, the tone setter of the defense by Jim Harbaugh, the best defense in Division I football, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of what separates him to a Caleb Murphy. I think when we talked about it during the pick, that Michigan coming from that program probably speaks a lot to the potential that he has in making this roster for sure.
Yeah, man. I think that he's got a chance, and we talk about making a devil's advocate argument for him. It's not hard. He's one of the last picks in the draft. He's a tweener size. He may be too raw or may not be quite the athlete physically to hang at the NFL level. But I don't necessarily see that as the more likely outcome when I look at this guy. I think that he's got a real shot.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
think that concludes today. Any more comments we need to get to, or are we gonna get out of here? We've gone long, but we went shorter. I think last year's post draft show went a full 2 and change. So
it
we
might.
got better.
I mean, yeah, I think that PPG 83 comes in with a question that says, "What are the biggest needs that weren't addressed? Which free agents could we add to that?" I think that free agent safety market is going to be really interesting this week and next.
Safety becomes the number one thing. Yep.
But besides that, I mean, that those are things that we're going to talk all the rest of this offseason. What do these Titans need to maybe be competitive in this next year?
Right. I think you just off the top of my head, the biggest needs they have now, it's safety, right? And it is depth at receiver. You hear the news of Zay Jones being cut by the Jaguars. Could they sniff up that tree? Potentially. Sniff up that tree. I think bark is the word I'm looking for. Weird imagery. Yeah. Weird imagery. Don't write that down.
Sniff around.
Yeah, sniff around or bark up the tree, but don't sniff trees. You might get arrested. You're on shrooms or something. Those are the biggest things, I think. Tackle is still a thing, but in terms of being able to address it, they could go out and still sign a Andres Pete, but then that brings into question, to do what exactly? Is he your backup plan at left tackle? If Latham doesn't work out, is he going to be the left tackle? And you're going to play Latham on the right side, and you decided to change your mind, or you lied? I don't really know. So in terms of just on paper, the biggest needs is tackle, it's receiver depth. Oh, tight end. I forgot to mention tight end. They need dudes at tight end. They need bodies. Now that brings us to another point. I saw this question earlier. Somebody asking about UDFAs. No UDFAs today. We're not going to start UDFA talk at hour 2. But we will talk about them later on. We'll probably talk about them on Thursday, by the way, if you're still here. On Thursday, we'll be having longtime friend of the show. It's been a while since we've had him. I think the Senior Bowl in January, the last time we had him on, James Foster, our buddy. He's coming on Thursday, going to spend all day with us talking about this Titans class, as well as some other classes around the AFC South, which he has some detailed thoughts on. So we'll pick his brain all of Thursday. Make sure to tune into that episode as well. But as for UDFAs, if you want to just hear the list, here's the list that we know of. You got Robert Javier out of Townsend, who's a cornerback. You've got Dylan Johnson, running back out of Washington. Isaiah Aiton out of Rutgers and Ole Miss. He's a defensive tackle. Khalid Duke is a defensive end from Kansas State. NC State kicker Braden Narveson coming in to compete with Granddaddy Stronglegs. He was a UDFA that is going to be competing for the kicker job. Safety Keaton Ellis out of Penn State. This list is written in the worst possible way. It's like the language from the reports, like Exclusive Sports Agency has posted the Titans will sign. Iowa tight end Steven Stylianos. David Martin Robinson is a tight end that they signed as well. So a couple of tight ends there that they added, did some bodies for camp at least. Former Vanderbilt and Tennessee defensive back Gabe Judy Lawley, who I have talked a little bit about on Twitter and talked to on Twitter. He signs with the Titans, and his dream comes true, getting to play for his favorite team growing up, or at least compete to play. Texas Tech offensive lineman Cole Spencer signing with the Titans. Brian Dooley is an offensive lineman out of Eastern Michigan. Jabari Small, a lot of Tennessee fans will know him. He played for Tennessee at running back last year. Bryce Oliver, a receiver out of Youngstown State. Good luck to Bryce. Sam Schnee is a wide receiver out of Northern Iowa. Love that. The NWI Wildcats or
UNI.
That's the one. NWI. Nice. Liberty offensive lineman Xavier Godwin that's an awesome name. I hope he pans out. And cornerback Rod Gaddison is a player that is coming from Western Carolina. So there's your list compiled by our buddy Nick Suss. I'm going to get on him for listing these in the worst possible way, but those are all of them that I know of. So there you go. We'll talk more about those guys on Thursday. Until then, we're getting out of here. We are long overstaying our welcome. Hope you guys appreciated that rundown. Again, if you wanted our live reactions, you can go back one episode in the feed, find the compilation from the weekend. It's about an hour 45, and you can skip around with the timestamps to find your favorite reactions to these picks. Until Thursday, for producer JT, I'm your host, Eastn Freeze. Like, subscribe, all of those things wherever you get your podcasts, on Twitter, on YouTube. Help us out there. We'll talk to you on Thursday.